Hello, my friends. I'm Dr. Zobia, internal medicine physician and geriatric health specialist. And today we're going to have one of the most important, potentially life-saving, and frankly controversial conversations about 3 medical tests that your doctor will insist are mandatory after age 70, but that medical evidence increasingly shows may cause more harm than good for healthy seniors. I believe it's time to bring this critical medical information to light with scientific evidence that the medical establishment doesn't want to discuss openly, because these tests generate billions in revenue. Because when we understand what the research really says about screening tests in seniors over 70, we don't just avoid unnecessary procedures, we prevent serious complications and focus on interventions that actually improve quality of life and longevity. So, welcome back to this space where patient-centered medicine supersedes profit-driven protocols, and where evidence-based care replaces automatic testing that may do more harm than good. Whether you're approaching 70 already, past it, or caring for elderly parents, this information could literally save your life or the life of someone you love. Because here's the uncomfortable truth. I've observed during 28 years of geriatric medicine practice, there are 3 tests that doctors routinely order for patients over 70, claiming they're mandatory for health maintenance, but that major medical organizations have quietly changed their recommendations on acknowledging these. Tests often lead to overdiagnosis, over-treatment, and serious complications in elderly patients who would have lived longer, healthier lives if they'd never been tested. Now let's go directly to the situation I see constantly in my practice, a situation that breaks my heart because I know the harm that's about to unfold. The scenario is this. Doctor, I'm 73 years old. I feel great. I'm active. I have no symptoms, but my doctor is insisting I need a colonoscopy, aggressive cancer, screening, and stress testing because these are mandatory at my age. But I've heard stories of seniors who had complications from these procedures. I'm confused because I feel fine. Do I really need these tests? Or is there something my doctor isn't telling me about the risks versus benefits at my age? This is the question that arrives from healthy seniors who instinctively sense something is wrong with aggressive testing when they feel fine. Comes up in consultations where families are trying to protect their elderly loved ones from unnecessary medical interventions, and reflects the growing awareness that more medical care isn't always better care. Especially after 70, I want you to stay for this complete medical revelation, because by the end, you'll have information that can protect you from procedures that medical evidence increasingly shows cause more harm than benefit in healthy seniors, potentially adding years of quality life by avoiding complications from tests you never needed. All right, let's start with the medical reality that few doctors will discuss honestly with their elderly patients. Medical screening tests are designed for populations where the benefits outweigh the risks. But this calculation changes dramatically after age 70 because your life expectancy, the natural pace of disease progression, and your body's ability to tolerate procedures all shift fundamentally. But as with all aspects of geriatric medicine, the nuanced understanding of risks, benefits, and individual circumstances is absolutely crucial. Generic protocols designed for 50-year-olds are often actively harmful when applied to healthy 75-year-olds. Yet most doctors continue ordering these tests automatically without honest discussions about whether they'll actually help you live longer or better. So let's start with the fundamental medical principles. What are the 3 tests that are routinely pushed as mandatory after 70? Why does the medical evidence increasingly question their value in healthy seniors? What are the real risks that doctors often minimize or ignore? And most crucially, how can you have an informed conversation with your doctor about whether these tests are truly necessary for your specific situation, or whether refusing them is actually the healthier choice? Let's start with the 3 mandatory tests that I believe most healthy seniors over 70 should seriously consider refusing. Mandatory. Test number 1, routine colonoscopy, screening after age 75. This is the test that causes the most complications in elderly patients while providing minimal benefit. The U.S. Preventive Services Task Force now explicitly recommends against routine colonoscopy screening after age 75 for people who've had normal previous screenings. Why doctors still push it. Colonoscopy is extremely profitable. Each procedure generates $3,000 to $5,000 in revenue for the medical system. Gastroenterologists have strong financial incentives to continue screening elderly patients even when medical evidence says they shouldn't. The hidden risks they don't tell you. After age 70, your risk of serious complications from colonoscopy increases dramatically. Bowel perforation occurs in 1 in 300 procedures for seniors versus 1 in 1,000 for younger people, often requiring emergency surgery. Cardiovascular complications from the sedation increase significantly. The bowel prep itself can cause dangerous dehydration and electrolyte imbalances that can trigger heart problems or falls. What the research really shows, a landmark study published in JAMA, Internal Medicine followed 50,000 seniors over age 75 for 10 years. Those who continued routine colonoscopy screening had no improvement in colon cancer mortality compared to those who stopped screening but had significantly higher rates of hospitalization for complications from the procedures themselves. Here's the medical reality. Colon cancer is slow growing. If you're 75 and had a normal colonoscopy at 65, any polyp that develop will take 10 to 15 years to become dangerous cancer. Statistically, you're much more likely to die from heart disease, stroke, or other causes before that slow-growing polyp ever threatens your life. Meanwhile, the colonoscopy itself has immediate real risks of serious complications, the exception if you're having symptoms, bleeding, significant changes in bowel habits, unexplained weight loss, then diagnostic colonoscopy may be appropriate, but routine screening when you feel fine is what the evidence increasingly argues against after 75. Mandatory. Test number 2, aggressive prostate cancer screening with PSA tests after age 70. This is perhaps the most controversial screening test because we now have definitive evidence that it leads to massive overdiagnosis and overt treatment of cancers that would never have caused problems. Why doctors still push it? PSA testing is quick, easy, and generates substantial follow-up revenue through biopsies, surgeries, and radiation treatments. It's become so routine that many doctors order it automatically, without discussing whether it's actually beneficial. The hidden truth about prostate cancer. Most men over 70 have some prostate cancer cells. Autopsy studies show that 60 to 70% of men who died of other causes had prostate cancer they never knew about because it was growing so slowly it never caused symptoms. These are cancers that would have never threatened their lives. What the research really shows, the European randomized study of screening for prostate cancer followed 162,000 men for 13 years. For men over 70, PSA screening did not reduce death from prostate cancer, but did lead to huge increases in biopsies, surgeries, and radiation treatments, all with serious side effects, including incontinence and impotence. Here's what they don't tell you. When you get a PSA test after 70 and it's elevated, you'll be pressured into a prostate biopsy. That biopsy has a 2 to 3% risk of life-threatening infection, much higher in elderly men. If the biopsy finds cancer, which it often will because prostate cancer is so common, you'll be pressured into treatment, even though the cancer would likely never have threatened your life. The devastating consequences. I've seen dozens of healthy 75-year-old men who felt great, got a PSA test, found cancer, underwent surgery or radiation, and ended up with permanent incontinence and sexual dysfunction, all to treat a cancer that would have never bothered them in their remaining 10 to 15 years of life. The medical consensus, the American Cancer Society, U.S. Preventive Services Task Force, and American Urological Association all now recommend against routine PSA screening after age 70 unless you have a strong family history or concerning symptoms. Third test, mandatory. Aggressive cardiac stress testing in asymptomatic seniors. This is the test that doctors use to check your heart, even when you have no chest pain, shortness of breath, or cardiac symptoms. It sounds prudent, but for healthy seniors, it often leads to a cascade of unnecessary interventions. Why doctors still push it? Stress tests lead to highly profitable follow-up procedures, cardiac catheterizations, stances, and bypasses that generate hundreds of thousands in revenue. Cardiologists have strong financial incentives to find problems that require intervention. The hidden dangers, stress testing itself can trigger heart attacks in elderly patients. The test literally stresses your heart to its maximum capacity. False positive results are extremely common. 40 to 50% of abnormal stress. Tests in seniors show nothing wrong when followed up with catheterization, leading to unnecessary invasive procedures with real risks. What the research really shows, a study. In the Journal of the American Medical Association Cardiology followed 10,000 seniors without cardiac symptoms. Those who had routine stress testing had no better cardiac outcomes than those who didn't, but had significantly higher rates of complications from follow-up procedures that the stress tests triggered. The cascade of harm. Here's the typical scenario. You're 73, feel fine. Get a stress test just to check. It shows something abnormal. You get rushed into cardiac catheterization. They find a 40% blockage that would never have caused problems. They put in a stent to be safe and you end up on blood thinners for life with increased bleeding risks. All because of a screening test you never needed. The medical reality. If you're having symptoms, chest pain, shortness of breath, unusual fatigue, then stress. Testing can be appropriate diagnostic tool, but screening healthy, asymptomatic seniors leads to overdiagnosis of problems that don't need fixing and exposes you to serious procedural risks. Let me give you a specific example that illustrates all three of these issues. A patient named Margaret came to me at age 76. She was active, healthy, no symptoms, felt great. Her previous doctor had scheduled her for colonoscopy, PSA testing for her husband, and cardiac stress testing, calling them all mandatory preventive care. I reviewed the medical evidence with her and her husband. We discussed that at their age, with no symptoms in previous normal screenings, these tests were more likely to find problems that would lead to risky treatments than to actually extend their healthy lives. They decided to refuse all three tests, focusing instead on the interventions that actually do improve healthy longevity. After 70, daily walking, strength, training twice weekly, Mediterranean, diet, social engagement, and management of their blood pressure and cholesterol with medications. 5 years later, at age 81, Margaret is still active, healthy, and thriving. Meanwhile, 3 of her friends who did have those mandatory tests ended up with serious complications. One hospitalized for colonoscopy, perforation, one with permanent incontinence after prostate cancer, treatment, and one on blood thinners after a stent he didn't need. This story isn't unique. I've seen this pattern hundreds of times. Healthy seniors who refuse aggressive screening often live longer, healthier lives than those who submit to every test doctors recommend. The evidence supporting refusing these tests in healthy seniors includes evidence number 1. A comprehensive analysis published in JAMA found that for seniors over 75 with no symptoms and previous normal screenings, routine colonoscopy, PSA testing, and cardiac screening led to no improvement in mortality but significant increases in procedure-related complications. Evidence number 2, the Choosing Wisely campaign, supported by dozens of medical specialty societies, explicitly recommends against these screening tests in elderly patients without symptoms, calling them examples of low-value care that wastes resources and harms patients. Evidence number 3, international comparisons show that countries with less aggressive screening of elderly patients like the UK have similar or better health outcomes for seniors compared to the US, where aggressive screening is routine. The questions you should ask your doctor before agreeing to any screening test after 70. Question number 1. Given my age and health status, what is the actual probability this test will find something that will genuinely threaten my life in my remaining years? Doctors rarely provide this crucial context. Question number 2. What are the specific risks of complications from this test and any follow-up procedures it might lead to? Make them give you numbers, not vague reassurances. Question number 3. What would we do differently based on the results? Would